want to join us on screen, that would be lovely. And we'll get started. So before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands in which we all meet today. Today I'm coming to you from Turrbal and Yugara country, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I would like to say that we have all come today to learn, and that this land has been a place for learning for thousands of years. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. It's really exciting. It's our last webinar for 2023, which is really, really great. And we're ending the year on, I think, a great high. We're joined by the magnificent Noa, who's come to join us again. Noa runs her own HR consultancy, Spark and Rumble. And she is herself a breast cancer survivor, although she'll talk to you about that during today's session. And she's an all-round great lady. So we're so excited to have her here. And as we've got people joining, do remember, put your video on. We'd love to see your beautiful faces. And it's a very interactive webinar today. So we're talking about boundaries. And this is the most timely time to be doing so because Christmas is about a month and a bit away. So we're going to be seeing people, we're going to be interacting with people, and just generally throughout our lives. So I'm so excited, Noa. Let's hit the ground running.
Excellent. So as we said, we would love questions. So if you're on the Facebook site or and I think today, Rochelle, you are fielding our thousands of questions that are going to flood the airways. Is that right? So just feel free. We want it interactive. So it's not like school. So just feel free to ask. And now, can I ask, can anyone see my screen or do I need to share my screen?
No, you need to share your screen.
We need to share.
Cannot see your screen
So
yet.
Usually Rochelle and I chit chat and ask questions. This time I prepared in advance a magnificent presentation that we don't need to finish or go through, but we thought might help the conversation. So again, the aim for this is to be interactive. And so if this doesn't work for you guys, let us know and we'll so what I'm doing as we speak is finding the video panel that has just disappeared. There it is. Woo! Okay. So friends, we are going to get curious about boundaries. I'm going to start with my favorite thing to do is ask you questions so I don't have to speak, right? Like that's what we're doing. But before we do that, as everything that I do, one of the things that I remember from my breast cancer journey, one of the, I think, most important things that I was told when we had our young women's support group at the time, and it was October, and in October, there's obviously Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and our psychologist said, remember to respect your story because your story is important. So as we share stories or as you hear things, there's no need to be like anyone. There's no need for your story to fit. This is a space where all stories are loved and respected. We do want lots of questions, but, respect your story. So we're going to start with questions. So in the chat, or I don't know, speak. Tell me how important 0 to 10 is being generous to you. 0 to 10. 10 being a lot. Okay, so just in case we're not clear. So how important is it to you? Let me see our chat.
Oh, we got a few 9s.
9s.
That's awesome. I'm the lowest, 7.5, and then we've got 8 and then 3 9s. That's
okay. So
maybe
very
generous group.
If I call on you guys, are you able to unmute yourself? Like, is that maybe Josie? Yep. Do you want to tell us about your 9?
Yep. Yeah, I feel like that's one of my core life values is generosity. So I think that one definitely resonates with me, both like being generous to others and giving to others, but also allowing yourself to receive that as well.
Amazing. And so the next question, because there's always a follow-up question with me. So do you find that anything stops you being generous? Like other things that get in your way? So you really, really want to be generous, but there's something that gets in your way?
I think for me lately, it's just been physically not being well enough to be generous in the way I'd like to be. And then sometimes, like, I don't know, financial limitations where you'd like to do certain things, but you can't sort of always warrant spending certain amounts if that's the way you want to deliver it.
So it sounds like those are external boundaries or barriers that you're facing.
Yeah, I off the top of my head, yes.
Okay. It is a surprise question, so I understand. But if you think of anything else, let us know. Does anyone else want to have a go? Who 7.5? Tell us, Rochelle, why 7.5?
Oh, look, I started with an 8 and then I changed it to a 7.5 because I don't know. I think the way that Josie's just put it makes me question it a bit. But I think I've had to learn to be a little bit selfish in my self-compassion. And so, I don't know. I've been known to be very generous and I am a very generous person. But yeah, I have to hold back a bit because I'm too generous sometimes. So yeah, I don't know.
So I'm really glad I asked that question because what we want to do is, let's say you want to be a 9. Okay, so let's go with Josie. You want to be a 9, but you have to stop yourself, right? The idea is how can we be boundaried so that we are as generous as we want to be, but don't feel like people will take as much as they can. So the problem with when you want to be generous and then someone just, okay, do you have anyone do this? Do you have a minute? And then that minute actually is not a minute, it's an hour, and that hour is actually 3 hours because I need to meet after that, right? And then you feel like people take more than you want to give, and that creates resentment. Right. So there's boundaries like this is the finances I have. I can't contribute more than that, or this is the energy I have. But there's also an element of people take more than I want to give. And then how do I respond to that? Right. So I love the word selfish. We're just going to try and find a different word. You can use it. Like, I'm not going to take it from you. I'm just going to offer a different one. How does that sound? Let me know if we're successful by the end of this. Deal? Like, let's do it.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Michelle, do you want to have a go on why 9? Or are you?
I have a very strong belief that it's genetic. It's a genetic disposition. My parents are very, very generous people. I have a very good example right now. So I'm at my dad's house and he's a chef. And he makes this soup, which is my favorite soup of all time. And I come in and he's only made 2 bowls, enough for me and him. And I've said, is there any more? I'd like to take some to work. And he says, oh, it's only 1 each, but you can have mine. You can take it if you'd like.
Oh.
So I think that just sort of shows an example of the many, many generous things that my parents do. And so genetically, I'm disposed to have that same gene.
Okay, nice. Does anything stop you being generous, Mish?
I don't have enough time and money to give to everyone. I wish I did.
Got it. Nice. Okay, so remember this, we're going to close off with this question. Okay, you hold me to it. Whatever happens, we're going to close off with this question. Deal?
Okay.
So our next question is clear is kind, which is Brene Brown's. Unclear is unkind. It's unkind. Does everyone in this chat agree? Put a Y in or an N. So do you agree that clear is kind, or do you not agree that clear is kind? Let me see your letters. Rochelle's not. Unclear is unkind. Yes and no. Okay, I see a debate coming. We have Y from Josie. What about Rachel? Hadass is not sure. Rachel is sure. Okay, Hadass, you won the lottery. Tell me why you're not sure.
Hey, sorry for not opening my video. I'm not sure because I think some people, when you make things clear, and for me to be clear can be direct and like be aggressive, maybe a little bit, or perceived as like being like making boundaries can be sometimes, I don't know, a way of, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I agree or not agree with that, because in some ways I do, but in some ways it can, yeah. I hope I made myself clear. I don't know.
Yeah. So let me try and say what I heard, and if it's not it, just jump in and fix it for me. So I think you believe the clear is kind because that's the principle you follow, but often it doesn't feel kind to other people because it feels aggressive, or
Yeah,
you wanted
yeah,
a different outcome and now you've made them uncomfortable.
yeah, exactly. Like I wouldn't want to hurt anyone by being clear and putting people like on, like, say, yeah, I guess in a way.
So this is where the note taking starts, okay? And especially at the moment, we have mainly ladies on, and we are very, very much predisposed, whether it's Michelle's genetics or I don't know, society or who we are, to be very sensitive to not hurting other people. Now, I'm all up for not hurting other people, unless we're confused. Like, I would like an outcome where everyone feels comfortable and joyous and we ride off into the sunset. That is not how life happens. It's also not how innovation happens. It's also not, it doesn't make sense that that's what we want from life all the time. We are going to get run-ins, right? How we conduct ourselves, how we interact is a different question. So it's a really, one of the pulls and pushes that we have with boundaries is that we want to be boundaried, but we don't want to hurt anyone. And in the process of not hurting anyone, we diminish ourselves. Okay, so and really there's conversations of selfishness and why am I putting myself in the center and blah blah blah, right? There's a lot of things that are pulling at us. My question in this slide is clear kind? Okay, so is in general, like if we're thinking of a principle, do we think that if someone is clear with us, so let's say Rachel and I are dating. Welcome, Rachel. Congratulations. And I don't want to continue the relationship. I can just ghost her. I can be a little bit evasive when she makes bids for affection, right? Like I can do that, or I can say, hey, I'm not really feeling it at the moment, right? So and again, nobody said that the outcome of this is joyous, but clear, as in this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, this is my integrity. The principle of it is it's kind, and that's what I'm asking this room. Does everyone agree with that? So the principle, right? Rachel, you agree? Do you want to say it a bit?
Yeah, it took me a bit. Like I was thinking about it actually, and maybe I'm just thinking about it in one scenario, but yeah, similar to like a breakup or like in a relationship or a friend breakup as well. Like it's like you do suffer if you have no idea like what's going on and why it ended. So yeah, ambiguity to me is just almost like torturous as well. So yeah, I always prefer to have like direct communication, whether or not it can be painful, and that's why like I appreciated Hadass saying it's like she's not sure, but like it is very much for me. I think I really do need the honest truth in situations like that, painful or not. So you're just not like stuck wondering.
So, and that's the kindness, right? The kindness is nothing is jumping out at you from the behind the scenes. Now, just because life is really special today, I've left something on the oven, it turns out, and it is burning. So we're going to wait 1 second while background music is playing. Just a sec.
Oh, I love this woman. She's awesome. I also love Brene Brown, and as soon as I saw these colors, so this is from her Dare to Lead stuff. That if you need a book to read after this session, go and get yourself a copy of Dare to Lead. It is amazing. Sorry, big Brene fan over here.
So a lot of this, and even the books that I've read on boundaries specifically, reference the work of Brene Brown. So we're going to talk about this. Mainly, I want you to think of the idea as we're not mind readers. Okay. And when someone treats you like you were supposed to read their mind, you get really offended. If you think of workplace scenarios where someone comes in and really disappointed in your work, so here's your termination letter, you're really offended. You're like, where were all the conversations that you could have had on the way? And so on. So this setup of generosity and clear as kind is setting us up to think about boundaries from what we can achieve, not from how much we're going to hurt, because that we're going to hurt is really strong. Okay, so we know it's really strong. So I want you on a piece of paper or for yourself in like, this is a kind of a 30-second exercise. I want you to look at these 4 questions and rate from 0 to 10 how bound you are in each of these. And it's a kind of 10-second thinking, so it's not deep. Well, it is deep, but fast. So just do some sort of sign that you've finished. So at work, in my family, in my social relationships, and in my health journey. So if you would say, so in my health journey, I'm 5. In my social relationships, I'm a 2. In my family, I'm a 10, right? Like it could be whatever works. Okay, we got nice. Emma G, if you want to put your responses, but you don't have to. So does anyone else want to put their numbers in? I don't want to. So Hadass, 7 work, 6 family, 5 social, and 8 health. So Hadass, are you able to talk or?
Yeah.
Excellent. So do you want to talk us through, let's say, the lowest and the highest? So why is social 5 and why is health 8?
Okay. Okay. I'll start by saying that I'm a very generous person who likes to give to people, and I have a lot of giving in me. So it's hard for me to put boundaries of things that I love to give and help, to offer my help. So I guess at workplaces, it's a little bit easier because boundaries are very, like, even at work, I will find myself hard to say no. I will take more than I should, but I learned, I had my process within workplaces where I learned that it's okay to say no and to say this is not acceptable and I can't do that. But with my family, I often want to give more than I can, and like I can set my boundaries, but I feel like I fail often. Like it's easy for me to set boundaries for my for my for my husband, for my partner, and for the kids. However, and I still get to do everything in some sort of way, if you know what I mean. So I get exhausted and frustrated out of that. And with friends, you mentioned the word resentment of being very, very generous and give and give and give, and you often want to offer help, but when it's only one-sided, sometimes I feel like, why is that? And like I don't give in a way that I'm like I don't expect to get back, because by giving it help, like it makes me happy, and by being helpful and by giving, it doesn't matter if it's a physical help or advice or whatever, but or by giving, by actual giving. But it's sometimes I feel people are more takers than givers, and sometimes it's I often jump to help, so I find it, I don't know, I'll just stop the talking.
I think you've and I think I'm watching heads nod, right? Like you've really described the tension in the experience of wanting to give and wanting to be generous, and assuming that others are like us, or that our assumptions are what their assumptions are, and then having a response that actually surprises us. Like it actually genuinely goes, wait, what? But I would help in this case, right? Like, how come you're not? And this is ongoing. It never ends, right? It never ends. And you know, I do birthdays for my kids, and they're older now, so this is a story from the past, and they never do it for me, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, it is clear it's a birthday, you should be doing right. And so that tension is constant in all our spaces, whether it's intentional and mean, or it's unintentional because lack of awareness. And what we're trying to do here is get a little bit of sense of how to interact with that, right? Because your experience, Hadass, one of the things that comes with it, I think, is a depletion of energy. So I give and give and give and give, and then there's just nothing. And the resentment often doesn't come from the giving, it comes from the depletion.
Yeah.
Is that right? Like, do you guys agree? Or
I agree, totally.
So I'm just jumping for a second because I promised you that I was using the slides not in a specific way. So this is what happens to us. Can everyone see this screen?
Yep.
These are some of the things that happen to us when a boundary has been crossed. So we notice because we're depleted, we're angry, we procrastinate. So, I'll invite them to dinner maybe later. And then you go, oh, so sorry, I forgot, or, you know, something like that, right? Like you procrastinate, and then that tells you that you're actually not looking forward to see that person as much as you thought. You know, in-laws are often, that's a situation that might be familiar to some of you. Also, if you yourself are like a peacemaker, like just keep the peace, whatever happens, keep the peace. Like if there's a constant keep the peace, something else is going on. Maybe we need to have a little chit chat about something that we're not doing because we're keeping the peace. Does that make sense? And the last one was my attempt to make like give a sense of feeling smaller. So if you feel smaller in a situation in an ongoing way, right? Something's up. Like no environment should make you feel smaller. And I think some of us in our health journeys, when doctors speak to us, they often, not often, sometimes you have the experience where, hi, where am I in this conversation? Like, anyone want to join me here, over here? And then you're like, oh, but they're busy. I must have misunderstood, right? Like there's all these things of making yourself smaller, right? I can tell you an example. I don't know. When I was going through radio, and by then I'd done chemo, like I was a mess, right? Like my body was just doing whatever it wanted. And I needed to take bloods. Someone, and the blood nurse started yelling at me for having bad veins, like yelling at me. I'm like, I don't feel this is the right interaction. And kind of, she went, go. And I had to go find a blood nurse, which was I had to do a trek in the hospital. And I went looking in this. And so by then I was like a weepy, you know, mess of a human. And I came in and she said, this is going to hurt as my high. And I said, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to find a way to not make it hurt, because I've been like, I'm in a lot of pain and I'd really like it to not hurt. And she just looked at me. I'm like, we need to make it not hurt. And she found a baby thing, like there's a baby butterfly apparently for children. And that is how we did it that day. But it was really interesting because I just had it, and I wasn't yelling and I wasn't angry. I'm just like, we're just not going to make this hurt. And she responded, right? Does that make sense? So even in kind of like I felt so small, and I'm like, actually, I have a choice, right? It was quite funny, actually, like, especially finding them. So I just want to quickly, nope, I've missed it. So this is what I wanted to get to. So I showed you what it looks like when we skip, when boundaries are crossed. But this is the slide that I wanted to get to in the sense. I want you to have a look at it and just see how it feels to think of yourself as 100% safe, as having really deep relationships and having a sense of agency. Is that something that you for yourself, and also for people that you're leading or interacting with your kids, your family, is that something you would want for yourself? Right? To have a sense of integrity to self. Is this something that do something with your heads or with your letters or Michelle's like, she's in. Okay, we have Josie's in. So the outcome of setting boundaries, we'll talk about how in a second, is that boundaries make people feel safe because you know that when you come to Noah's house, you don't smoke, right? Or you know that when you come to Noah's house, you'll be served the food that you're not allergic to. I don't know, something like that, right? You don't have to fight with other people to get the food that is healthy for you. Or in my case, my son has ADHD, and when he was little, had to go to sleep at a certain hour. And I didn't want to fight with family members on the fact that we have to leave at a certain hour because he has to go to sleep. Right. So when you go to somewhere and they go, how about we start dinner early because we know that your son needs to sleep at a certain time, that feels amazing, doesn't it? But first I have to put the boundary. First I have to say, sorry, I'm sorry we're those people, but we're going to go, right? Like, or we'll have to go at 8 or something like that. Does that make sense?
I'm going to catch you up on that language, Noah.
Yeah.
What's the sorry business?
So
can we talk about language when we're setting those boundaries? Because we don't need to apologize for what we've set as a boundary.
Beautiful. One of the rules is hashtag no permissions needed. So I love that catch. Well done. I'm usually sorry because it's a good time and I'm sorry that I have to go, but yes, but other than that, I don't need to apologize for setting a boundary. You're absolutely right. So that language is important, and it is important to catch that. So completely agree.
So in that example, Noah, just
Yep.
so that we've got an example here, if you were in that situation and you had to explain about your son and needing to go, what's a way that you could say that would be more respectful for yourself without apologizing?
So usually I would do it in advance so that whoever has invited me doesn't have to, is not surprised, right? Because I want to respect the invitation and say, we'd love to come over. One of the things that I want you to know is that we'll have to head home. And depending on how much, I don't even have to say why. Like, I actually don't have to say my son has to go to sleep, right? Like, I don't. But if it's family and they know us and that, then I'll say, my son has to be at a certain, you remember my son has to be in bed by a certain time. So we'll be heading out at 8. So if it's a birthday, let's do the cake before, right? Like, there's all these things that happen before. And if it's a problem, then I'll say, thank you for the invitation. We won't be able to attend. Hopefully we can attend another time. We love coming over. Something like that, right? So it's recognizing the appreciation, but that we in this situation are unable to attend. And the principle here is that you state your behavior. You can state why if it's appropriate, but if it's not appropriate, then feel free to just state your behavior. You do not have to have the other person understand, accept, or agree with your boundary.
I think that's the really interesting point of the entire exercise, is being confident or secure in your own self, that when you place that boundary, that if there is going to be resistance or sometimes anger towards you about that boundary, that you have, I guess, information that you can share, or that you're just comfortable in your own skin to say, well, actually, no, that's the decision that we've made or I've made about this part of my life. Yeah. So yes, great segue. There we go. Good.
So what we haven't done is what is a boundary. So I might actually pause this beautiful conversation for 2 minutes because I do want, so I love Brene Brown's definition, which is what's okay and what's not okay. So is this okay with me? Like, it actually is that level of clarity. Is this okay with me? Now, sometimes when you go, it's not okay, you still don't know why, right? Like, because we are learning and searching in ourselves, and some of these situations are really hands down strange, right? Like you meet all these situations where like, I didn't know that this was a boundary for me, but ta-da, there it is, right? And so what's okay and what's not okay. And if it's not okay, I explore. If it's okay, I go on my merry way, all good. And it's fine, absolutely fine, that everyone around you doesn't see this as a boundary and you do. This is not a competition. Nobody goes, oh, I get this a lot. Why are you the only one that this bothers? I'm like, why is that a question? Like I actually say, do you want to know why it bothers me? Because the fact that other people are not bothered by this is not a question I can answer, right? But why are you the only one asking this question, or why does it bother you, is to me a question that is not curious, if that makes sense. Right? Like I want people to be curious about my boundaries, not more than that. And then Melissa Urban, who wrote the book that I will remember its name, it's in there. Boundary is a line that marks the limits of an area. Okay, and it's a real visual for me. So when I think about boundaries, maybe you're the same. I'm a very visual person. And the best thing for me about boundaries is the pool. Now, if this doesn't work for you, choose a different one. I'm going to offer you a couple of others. But do you see how flexible those are? You know how it's play and sink, or sink and play, or I don't know, do something and play in the water. You know how they've got the lane and then they extend it in school holidays. And then the serious swimmers, you know, judge you while they swim on the other side of the pool. That's how I think of boundaries, right? They move based on context. So if you don't move those boundaries during school holidays, they're going to go in the swimmer lanes. It's going to be mayhem. So boundaries are really clear. People still stay in their lanes. If you have those schmiggy thingies that you keep, if you're backstroking, you know how you backstroke and you always crash into it, or maybe that's just me. So that's how I think about boundaries. This is kind of the other one where it comes from a French philosopher called Michel Foucault, and he talks about the fact that we know that we are normal, okay, because he tried to define what normal is in societies by what's in the center, and what's in the center is defined by what's on the sides. So society hasn't been very nice to a lot of people through this process, right? So it used to be that people who didn't work were on the fringe, right? Like the way we've defined who's normal is not very nice sometimes, right? But the idea is what's in and what's out. Okay, and in groups and out groups. So what I want you to think is what's in the center of me, and then what's in my sides, what's out. Like this doesn't come into my space. Okay, you should see my response when someone is a bully. There is a very, very clear response. It is very clear, right? It can be kind, but it's clear, right? Inside out, Naka and Soto. And then the last one that I want to offer is this. So whatever works for you. Some people think of it as a fence. Okay, so fence, again, you can come in and out. Fences can move. I don't know how you move fences, but let's do that. But the idea is that a fence it sets limits, but it's adaptable to my context and integrity. So if I'm more vulnerable at some stage of my chemo or something, and I don't want to do something, that is fine. And then when I'm better and I feel stronger and I'm fine with doing, then I can change that boundary. And then when people say, but you said last time, like, yep, it's changed, right? Like, it's fine. The problem we have is when we try and make everyone happy, we build walls, because by the time we tell someone we are so angry and we are so done and they have proved that they are so not okay, that we're like, nah, right? And walls don't move, and walls don't respond to context, and walls keep people out in a way that doesn't allow a conversation. I always think about talking above the fence, like, like, hi, that's how I think about boundaries. And then when I was thinking about this, because one of the things that's important about boundaries is that we hold boundaries, I was thinking of that many of us create boundaries that are actually chocolate. They feel good when you bake them, but they melt under heat or under pressure, right? So a big thing about boundaries is that you hold your boundary. Okay, so making boundaries that you don't intend to follow up my strong suggestion is eat the chocolate, don't melt it. Like, just don't use it in boundaries, right? Like, either say that this is a boundary because you're going to follow it up, or don't say it and find something else to do is my recommendation. This is really hard, right? Nobody gets it right always. Any of these suit you? Like, does this sound, you can resonate?
I wonder if we could open up and just ask if anyone's got any questions, because there's a lot of different ideas there that are floating around. What maybe resonated with you? So if there's anybody who wants to jump in and let us know.
I just had more of a
Everybody's-
question. And my question was
Yeah.
around the swimming pool analogy.
Yeah.
You say that the lanes change based on context. What do you mean by that?
So, great question. The idea is, let's say that my kids are going through exam time, okay? And I want less visitors. So I say, hey guys, no, during this time, what I like, during August, if you want to come over, can you please call us in advance? So no pop-ins. Does that make sense? And then it's over and we're all good. I'm like, yep, pop-ins are fine now. I'd love to see you, anytime you're in our area. This is more, it doesn't happen. So I don't know, does it happen in your environments? Because where I come from Israel, like, people pop in, like, literally they've run out of food in their house, they come to your house, they don't call, they don't know. They just
show up.
Just show up. So you actually have to put a boundary. Like my when I was married, my brother-in-law, he used to bring his friends over and he'd say, you always have food, and they just sit down and eat while we were watching TV, and it was completely normal. So that was a joy to me. But if that doesn't fit anymore, then when I had the twins, it was, hey guys, you can come between 4 and 7, but after that it's bath time. And that wasn't as acceptable as you might think. Like, literally people said, but it doesn't suit us to come between those hours. I'm like, those are the times that are available. Does that make sense? So it is fine to move things around. And it could be that there's people that you feel more comfortable and you have different boundaries with at work, and not others. You are allowed to shift your boundaries around, but be clear is the guide.
When Noah and I were talking about this, we were talking about how, depending on context, you can be really good at holding a boundary, and then in certain other relationships or different contexts, you're terrible at it. And I definitely know that with my kids, I'm terrible at setting a boundary and holding it. They walk all over me because I just love them so much. But I would never allow people to do that in my day-to-day. So yeah, I think it's about context as well, about how you have that relationship with them, and yeah, what works for you.
So I'm going to challenge you on that one. So one of the things that you said is that because you love them so much, you struggle to give them a boundary, right?
Yes.
And
it's the follow through, isn't it? Yeah.
So here's what we do, and this part is important, and we might, if you're interested, we can talk about health, or we can continue on this line. But one of the things that boundaries start with me. Always. Boundaries always start with a check-in with myself. It does not matter if someone else is fine with this behavior. Okay, and the example when we were prepping, remember one of the things that I said that when I was going, when I needed to be prepared for my surgery, we went to a certain surgeon, and I just got the EBGBs. Like, for probably, I don't know if there was a reason, and I was like, I do not want to wake up from my surgery and see him. Right now, it could be I was sensitive. It could, I don't. And what went through my head is, why do you have to be so sensitive? Why do you have, like, he's recommended, like, I went through the whole list of, he's the best, because that's how people talk about it, right? Like, he's the best surgeon in Sydney. And then I went, wait, stop. It keeps coming up for you that you do not want this person around you, right? Whether I was right or wrong is not the question. And then I said, he can't be the best in Sydney because Sydney has lots of bests. So maybe go and look and talk to someone else. And I found another surgeon, And he was amazing on all fronts. And when I woke up from my surgery, I was so happy that I'd made that decision, because he was caring and gentle and asked about my kids, right? Like there was all these things that were important to me. And the struggle that I had was why it's not okay. Like, why do you, like, you know, my first conversation, well, why isn't, and then when I checked, I said, he's harsh and I'm in a vulnerable position and I don't want this around me. Now, it could be that my partner doesn't agree. I don't like, he's very good apparently to other people, not for me, right? And so what I did was I stated my action. I identified my need and I stated my action. And I didn't blame him, and I just went, I don't want this surgeon. I'm going to go look for another surgeon. And which is what I did, right? So the identify the need for the boundary is identifying the kind of icky, the anger, the making myself smaller. Identify that. Try and figure out what it is means for you so that you are able to then articulate the action. Okay. And then when people go, why do you have to be like, why can't you just be like everyone else and just go to the surgeon that was suggested? You can say, because it's important for me. Also, I don't need to answer your question, but because it's important for me and I'm going to enforce it, right? I'm going to follow through because it's me following through, not the other person. Okay, that's the important thing. Now, we always want to have the other person respond to us with, wow, thank you so much for telling me. I didn't know. Thank you so much for telling me. Absolutely on it. But sometimes they don't, right? Like sometimes when you say, please don't come visit me at chemo. Like I wanted everyone to visit me at chemo, so it was a party. But a lot of people don't, right? Please don't come visit me at chemo. I'd like to read my book. You know, if someone still comes and visits you, what do you do? Like, what do you do? Right? And so the question is, like, does anyone want to try? Does anyone want to try that example? Or have their own boundary setting?
Anyone want to be brave and put their hand up to share a story or an experience that they've had? Otherwise, I'm going to jump in and you don't want to hear any more of me, really.
I'm going to give one example to maybe warm it up, and then Rochelle, we're just going to chit chat, the two of us.
Okay.
One of the things that happened, when I was diagnosed, I was working at the university, so I had access to all the databases and the School of Health, right? So I was like placed for research galore, and I'm a researcher. So one of the things I decided early on was I was not going to start learning cancer now that I have cancer. That was my decision. I'm not telling you what you need to do, right? And so I decided that was a boundary. And so I asked people not to throw information at me. Most of the information people gave me was don't drink milk because it will give you cancer. Don't use deodorant because it will give you cancer. Like I got all of the best of the TikTok before TikTok existed. But what I asked was, I said, I need to trust my doctors. I'm going to ask them questions because they studied it before I got sick. And if I have a sense that I can't trust them, I will then go and research. But I made that decision. And then I asked people not to share with me, not to share articles, not to share. And if they want, they can share with someone near me, but I don't want to know. And I have to say, everyone respected that. That was really nice. And I didn't go into the databases. It was, whereas my friend who had, her husband had cancer, she researched the shit out of it. It was a completely different experience. So that's an example.
So what would you have done then, Noa, if somebody had decided to send you, like, oh my goodness, for all the good intentions in the world, you know, there are friends and family who are trying to, like, I've got this book at home. In fact, I think I should just bin it. But it's like, oh, reasons why you got cancer. I'm like, really? Do I need to have this in my space? No, I probably need to get rid of it. But yeah, well-meaning, but like, how's that going to help me now? Like, it's a bit late. So yeah, it's how do you deal with the people who don't know how to
let's do
listen?
this from the top, right? What's your boundary? Like what don't you want, or what do you want to have in your space?
Yeah, well, I think a very generic one for most breast cancer patients is they don't want to be told that they caused this to themselves. And so, I mean, it seems ridiculous to tell people, hey, don't tell me I caused this to myself.
Yes.
But yeah, how do you then counter those silly people who want to change those things in your mind?
So again, I would start with what level of fence we're, right? Like what distance we want. Because if it's a close person and they're going to be part of your journey because they're close to you, I think it's worth a deeper conversation because they love you and they're going to be there and they need some context because people cannot read our minds, right? And they genuinely want to help. Like, I think I told you last time I was going to write a book, Stupid Things People Tell You When You Have Cancer. Like that was like really like and well-meaning and loving and that. But what I didn't want to do was scare people away because they genuinely don't know what to say. It's not a, and so I would say, look, yep, I like milk. I can't remember what it was. PVC, so I don't remember. There was deodorants, there was all that. I said, got it, don't want to know. No, but milk. I'm like, again, don't want to know. Here's why. And if they start talking at some stage, so there was a few people who didn't listen. I'd be like, I can see that you want to talk about this. This isn't something I want to talk about. So I'm just gonna go to the bathroom. I'm coming back. Literally, that's what I do. I create a barrier, not an antagonistic barrier, but I create a barrier. And that goes, and then sometimes I explain. So people who I was closer to, I would explain. So I don't know if you guys remember, I told you the story. A family member said to me, I had the fuzzy hair, you know, the bunny hair where it can come back, and he's like, he was really caring, and he said, I wonder what you did in a previous lifetime. And I'm like, what? And he said, and he was really genuine, like he had thought this through. So he said, and he said, you know, you must have done something in a previous lifetime. And I said, you have to walk me through that one because I'm not clear on the process of previous lifetimes in cancer. And he said, you know, this is a true story, you know, like maybe you were a Nazi. Or wait, he followed it up with, or you stepped on ants. Now, this is a true story, guys. I'm not making it up. Lovely guy, true story. Just had dinner. We were chill. And then I went, so which one is it? Ants or Nazis? Because, you know, I'm not sure on how I assess this. And then I asked him after I kind of decided that I wasn't going to go for the violent option that I was feeling. I said, look, so the children, because at the time there was a famine, I said, the children that are dying from a famine in, I can't remember which country it was, Nazis or ants? He goes, what? I said, they must have done something in a previous lifetime. And then it started to click to him. And I said, you've just blamed me for having cancer by doing something in a previous lifetime. Like, how is that going to help a person that you're speaking to? And we then created a beautiful conversation because he was a care worker, like he actually worked in a care industry. And he said, you've really helped me to understand what the impact is. Now, everyone here in this room is going, he did what? He said what? But it made a lot of sense to him because in his world, if something happens, it was from a previous life. And so he felt free to tell me. He didn't identify that this was a boundary. He didn't think of it because in his world, this made sense. Okay. So it was a loving conversation, but it was very clear. I said, never again. Do not insinuate that I have brought this on myself. It was hard enough to get through it, and I'm lucky to be alive. So please. And and that was it. We were done. So that's an example. I know it's a weird one.
I don't know. It's a bit obtuse, but if anybody's game enough to join us and share something that might have happened or that you want some help with or want to throw open some conversation, please don't feel scared. Otherwise, I'm going to start naming people. So
I have a question.
Go, Josie.
Go, Josie.
So I don't know if this is relevant to everyone, but my question's around work because I'm looking at returning to work soon. I've been off for a while. And I guess my struggle at the moment is I don't really know what my boundaries are physically realistically in my capabilities yet because I'm only just about to start getting into it. So I guess if you had any tips, Noah, around like if you don't know what your boundaries are yet, because you don't know, say in that example, like I don't know exactly what my capabilities are yet. How do you then set those boundaries with your employer when you're still working out what they are? I don't know if that makes sense.
So I want it, and it's complicated. And again, this is where the moving the swim lane helps, right? So you may start in a certain way, and you may think sitting here that going back, I think we talked about it even last time, like when you go back and you think you're going to be fine for 2 days a week, but then you find that you get there and after 4 hours you have brain fog. And the idea is to say it's less boundaries and more of a plan, right? So you go, look, I'd really like to start it this way. I don't know my body at this point in time. This is my intention. What I'd like to do is if I am feeling unwell, I don't want to make a big song and dance of this. So who do I speak to that is my person? Is it an email? Is it a text message? What would be the way that I communicate my ability or inability as it happens? Right? Because one of the things that when I was head of HR is absolutely no one needs to fill out a form after they've gone through what they've gone through having cancer. Like, I don't want you to go, let me policy you through this process. It's who's my person? How would you like me to communicate whether I can or I can't do the plan? Does that would be a step. The other thing you want to decide, Josie, is how much you want to share. Because people, when you come back, don't need to know that you were sick. They don't need to know what you were sick with. They don't need to know how your body responds. If you wish to share it, please, right? But that's one of the things that I want you to have a conversation with yourself and go, what do I feel comfortable sharing with my workplace? We've seen some celebrities when they share that they're sick, they don't say what they're sick in because there's such a bias. People respond to them often in the bias. And so they want to prevent that in the big world, right? Like so again, make a decision. It could be that some people are safe to talk to and you can share more. And some people they just need to know that you return to work and you'll need flexibility in your return. So those are kind of conversations. Now, if people start responding in a way, just like I shared with this family member who had that conversation, you're able to go and do the same process and reassess with yourself. What is the current experience I want? Why is this not sitting well with me? Right? And what do I do next? Does that help, Josie?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. Thank you. That's yeah, even just like having a plan to know how I communicate if I can't go along with the plan is actually just a very helpful tip in itself. So yeah, thanks, Noah.
And it happens. So we think of ourselves as going through this and as you know, from our context, but I can tell you as a person who worked with a large workforce, there's parents returning to work and the children decide to be sick on the first day that you're returning to work, right? There's so many things that happen in the workplace that are human. We are going through this journey of the body. That is by no means the only thing that's going on. And so I would put that in the context of I'm a valuable person returning to work and I need a gradual response. What I share and I don't share is up to me and how I feel in the moment. Like I shared quite widely because I felt like I wanted to advocate for breast cancer, but that was me. Some people don't tell anyone, so.
That's true. Emma or Emma? We've got two Emmas, we've got two Rachels on the line. Does anybody else want to come up with a question before we're almost at time boundary, but we can keep going if there are questions. No?
It can be with doctors, with like, you know, in the medical community, with family.
I really, really love the context of the doctor conversation. I think it's a very interesting conversation to have in the context of being in a position where you can have choice. But when you're in the situation, perhaps where you're in say, the public system and you definitely cannot afford to go private, or you're in a regional area and there's only really one oncologist or one radiological oncologist or one, doctor even that you can talk to.
Yeah.
How do you formulate good working relationships with those doctors if you have to go and see them and they're the person that you have to work with?
I think that's a great question. I think in that conversation, you get really, really clear on what your red line is. And we're all very different, right? There's things that bother us and there's things that don't. I was seeing, I won't name, but I was being seen by a doctor who was incredibly condescending, like hands down. And then when I started to speak to some other women, they're like, yeah, that's what he does. And I'm like, right, that for me is a huge boundary. And I could see that not everyone was responding like me. One of the things that I did was try and get information from the team. So around doctors, there's often a team. There's a nurse, there's I don't know, there's other people. And so I tried to understand. Sorry?
Yep. Receptionist or like clinic manager.
Yep. So one of I won't say which doctor it was, but one of the doctors, when I was going through it, I came back and I said, look, I'd like to know what my plan is post cancer. And he said, we don't treat anxiety. And I was like, I thought I communicated the need for a plan because that's what my word said. And he went, we don't treat anxiety. That's what psychologists do. And I'm like, lucky I'm a psychologist. So I knew that, but I'm asking you for a plan. And I went really quiet. And then he saw that I wasn't happy. And then he kind of sidestepped and blah, blah, blah. What I did afterwards, I went to the geneticist who I had worked with through this. And I knew that we had a good relationship. And I said, what just happened? Like, what was that the response? And then she explained the difference between diagnosis and metastatic, and that might have been his, right? Like, so I just got more information. I went, oh, yeah, so he's in a different story than I am. So I went and I got the information. I actually went to my GP in this case because I was like, we need a plan, right? Like, but I used the team part. I understand that healthcare professionals are humans and they will interact with you like they interact with the rest of the world often, and often it's not what you need. So I search, but I have to say, if need be, I advocate for myself to an extent of we need to sort this out because this is important for me. And I very much risk that she's that patient, because we all know that we don't want to be that patient, right? And at some stage, I'm like, right, I'll be that patient. That's okay. This is important for me to get the information. So Hadass, I think similar to what you were saying at the beginning, yep, sometimes people think not positive things about me, but I accept, not happily, but I accept that comes with integrity. Integrity means that you often go, okay, it's the smaller pond that I'm fishing from. So I can't control, this is the thing, you cannot control what other people think. You cannot control what they will say to other people after you leave the room. You can say, I would like this kind of response. I would like this because it's important to me.
Yeah. And they have to be professional too, Noah. There's a lot of ego in the medical profession, and you are just as much an integral part of that industry as the people who've studied for a long time. In fact, if we didn't have patients, there'd be no need for medicine. So it's an important part of the picture. Yeah.
And I took responsibility. So one of the things I did, because I was not doing very well, I didn't want to do my 8th chemo. So I had 8. And on the 7th, I'm like, we're done here. It was a full-blown hissy fit. Just if we're not clear on it, I was like, meh, I'm executing my agency. And a friend told me, everyone's like, okay, fine. And the nurses were fine. And my best friend, one of my friends, just sat herself on the sofa and goes, you can come kicking, you can come screaming, we can go kicking and screaming. And she did that. So the response of the healthcare professionals are, if you're willing to take the consequence of if the cancer comes back and you didn't do your fullest, then so be it. and so that's also right. I have a right to not have full care and take accountability for it, but it's all about accepting the consequences of my choice. I do want to say one thing, and this might help as a practical thing. So there's a glass of water on this slide. And the glass
can't see your slide. You'll have to put your slide back up.
My slide is not on. Did not know that. Okay, so this slide is, can you see the boundaries? Or yes, you can see that.
Yep.
It's a little glass of water. There's not much to see. And what that slide represents is assertiveness. So when you're assertive, when you communicate assertively, one of the ways to think about it is asking for a glass of water when you're thirsty. So how would you do that, Rochelle? Like, how would you ask for a glass of water if you're thirsty? Like, you're at my home and you're thirsty.
As in, how would I ask you?
Yeah.
Hey, can I grab a glass of water?
Like, sure, the glasses are over there, right?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, is there anyone that would, if you're in a new person's home, be a little bit hesitant to ask?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
or they say help yourself and you're like, where are the glasses?
yeah, I just start opening people's habits. But the reason I ask is that there was a researcher on communication, and one of the things she describes is an interaction between a couple, and they're driving, and the woman says to the man, hey, are you thirsty? And he said, no. And then half an hour later, she like loses the plot and goes, why didn't you ask me if I was thirsty? Because I was thirsty. And right. And so that's passive aggressive communication, right? That's assuming that because I asked you, now you have to ask me. Whereas he just expected, if you're thirsty, you would say, hey, can we stop the car and get some water? Because I'm thirsty. And so often in boundaries, what happens is because we do all the hesitancy of communicating because we don't want to be that patient, or you know, they have a really long list and I don't want to, you know, I don't want to stop people from their process. We then become resentful, or we lose the plot somewhere else in a more dramatic way. Whereas my recommendation is, if you want something, ask for it like you're thirsty. Hey, I'm thirsty. Can I please have a glass of water? And if they say no, I'm like, okay, so I've got to go duck out, buy myself a bottle of water. I don't stop being thirsty because you're not giving me water. Does that make sense? So think about the conversations, just to simplify, think about the conversations around boundaries in that way. I think I have a little, I don't know where it is.
The video,
yeah, there's the video. If we have 5 minutes, I'm happy to show the video. But what Brene Brown says, and I told you that I would end kind of the session back to generosity. One of the things, especially when I had young children, okay, or teenagers, that is a lie, when they were teenagers, is the sense that they will take until there's not skin on my bones anymore, and then they'll go, okay, moving on to the next person, right? Like there was a sense of that. And that is not true. It might be true in the sense that they're not noticing because they're teenagers and frontal lobe and that kind of thing. But if I set boundaries, they will notice. Okay, that's the difference. And so I can be super generous because I know how much I'm going to give. I can volunteer my time between these hours and these hours. If not, I'll have to do it next week, is the answer to I don't have, like someone wanting more than I can give. Does that make sense? So boundaries enable you to stay in your integrity, and so be generous. If you are asked to bake cookies and you are sick and don't feel like it, or you know what, you're not sick, you just don't feel like baking cookies. You can say, thanks for asking. I won't be able to bake cookies for the cake stall today. Happy to be there on the day, but I won't be able to bake cookies. You do not have to explain why. You do not have to get into the, I'm so sorry, and I did it 6 months ago. You can just say, glass of water. And then you can feel generous, right? Like you maintain the generosity because you're in your integrity. And I just love that. I love that. I love that with my children, whether they love it or not. Partners, employers, and so on. And especially in healthcare professionals, we have great relationships as a result.
Oh, no, you've just reminded me of something Renee says as well about allowing people to understand what's okay, but also what's not okay. So I think we focus on one or the other. So we say, oh, it's not okay that you do X, Y, Z to me. But we don't then also say, well, actually, this is what's okay. So sharing what is and what isn't okay with people then allows them to think, oh, okay, that's where I need to be and that's how I need to interact. Yeah, so I can't think of an example right off the top of my head, but I think that's really good at not just saying this is what I won't accept, but also saying, well, this is what I will accept.
Yes.
And I think you gave an excellent example. You know, I'm not going to cook the cookies today, but I will come and help you. So where's that line for you? Yeah. Yeah.
Where's that line? And what is your generosity without going, oh, all the mothers are, and it's really hard. Like that one's really hard because it's quite, and now there's Instagram as well. So everyone's like perfect and Instagrammable. So I think, and what you said is really beautiful, because if we want amazing relationships, you can say, can you do that more often? So when people text me and say, are you okay? I respond with, thank you so much for thinking about, right? Like it's a do this more, right?
Mm.
I've got a family member who she expressed the boundaries really clearly, and she said, I do not want phone calls at this point. If I want to call you, I will call you, but I'm not okay, and I do not want to tell you that I'm not okay. Like it was like that. So it was more send more pictures of the dogs, right? Like there's do that a lot, don't do that, right? Like it's this kind of, and it's just a sharing of integrity. It just makes the world so much bigger, not smaller. So you're pissed off for 2 minutes, maybe, or you're surprised, but then you're clear. And you go, okay, I know what to do now, how to be your friend, or I know what to do now to be a supportive colleague in your return to work. And that's the world I want to live in, right? The clear world, the generous world.
Well, that's amazing, Noah. I think what we might do is put the YouTube link for Brene's video in with the recording. And we're also going to include all of the slides. If anyone wants to check in with Noah, you can hear how amazing she is. She's just a fountain of knowledge about all sorts of different things and has been there in our shoes, so gets it from a place of a patient and in this breast cancer journey too. So very, very cool to have you on board tonight. Thank you very, very much. I might leave it there. If anybody has any questions, reach out to me. I'll put you in touch with Noah. But thank you so much for everybody for coming tonight. And thank you so much, Noah. You're incredible. We will be doing some more webinars in next year. So if you've got any ideas about things that you'd like to cover, any topics that are like burning interest, please let me know and we'll try and do that. But yeah, for now, thank you everybody for coming.
Thanks, guys.